Russia has made provocative comments regarding the dispute between the United States and Europe over Greenland, with Dmitriev mocking Europe's position relative to Washington in public posts. The Kremlin envoy urged the EU to recall its soldiers from Greenland in a post aimed directly at European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. "Do not provoke the daddy," he wrote, a phrase designed to sting. The message framed Trump's tariffs as a per-soldier penalty, 1% per European soldier sent to Greenland, the envoy claimed. Whether accurate or rhetorical, the framing was unmistakable. Russia is watching the transatlantic tensions with satisfaction and appears eager to comment on them. What began as a bilateral dispute between Washington and Copenhagen has now drawn attention from Moscow, Paris, Berlin, and Brussels, with Greenland becoming a point of friction inside the Western alliance. The intervention came as Washington announced tariffs on multiple European nations, and Trump reiterated his interest in U.S. control of the strategic Arctic island. Russia's comments, while not official diplomatic positions, serve to highlight divisions within the Western alliance. Moscow's public commentary serves multiple strategic purposes. First, it highlights European dependence on American power, a vulnerability Russia has long sought to exploit. Second, it positions Russia as an observer of Western disagreements rather than the cause of them, shifting attention from its own actions. Third, the mocking tone is designed to suggest that European leaders cannot stand up to Washington and have no independent agency. The Kremlin appears to be betting that transatlantic tensions will continue regardless of Russian actions, and that commenting on them costs Moscow nothing while potentially yielding strategic benefits. For decades, Russian strategy has sought to highlight divisions within the Western alliance, exploit disagreements between Washington and European capitals, and question NATO's cohesion. The current situation is providing material for those objectives without Russia having to do much beyond offer commentary. The Kremlin's daddy reference serves to highlight European dependence while positioning Russia as an amused observer. Whether this posture is sustainable depends on how the situation evolves, but for now, Moscow appears content to watch and comment as Western allies disagree among themselves. The timing is particularly notable for Moscow, as Western attention focuses on internal disputes. Trump quickly tied economic tariffs to the European military presence in Greenland, linking the issue to broader strategic goals. The U.S. president announced tariffs on imports from 8 European countries, including Germany, France, the United Kingdom, and Denmark. The tariffs start at 10% immediately, with Trump warning they will rise to 25% by June. Trump has suggested that military deployments in Greenland justify economic retaliation, framing the issue as part of broader security concerns. The linkage between trade policy and military presence represents a notable approach, using economic tools in connection with security objectives regarding allies. The use of tariffs in connection with security disputes with allies represents a departure from post-World War II norms. The United States has previously used economic tools against adversaries, sanctions on Russia, Iran, North Korea, Venezuela. Connecting them to disputes with NATO allies over military exercises is different in character. If this approach continues, it could transform the nature of alliance relationships. Partners could become potential targets of economic pressure. Economic interdependence could become vulnerability rather than strength. European leaders must now consider whether economic ties with the United States create leverage for Washington that can be used in various contexts. The economic impact is already being felt across European markets, with uncertainty spreading through industries dependent on transatlantic trade. Trump has made clear that Greenland is a strategic priority for his administration. The president has called U.S. involvement with Greenland essential for national security, linking it to his proposed Golden Dome missile defense system. Greenland's location makes it strategically valuable for monitoring Arctic shipping routes, tracking Russian and Chinese military activity, and positioning defense assets. Climate change is opening Arctic shipping routes and making previously inaccessible resources available. The Arctic is becoming a zone of great power competition involving the United States, Russia, China, and European nations. Whoever has the closest relationship with Greenland gains significant advantages in this emerging arena of competition. Trump has argued that Denmark cannot adequately defend Greenland against serious threats. In recent remarks, he mocked Danish defense capabilities, noting they had added a second dog sled last month and calling that inadequate. There's not a thing that Denmark can do about it if Russia or China wants to occupy Greenland, Trump stated, but there's everything we can do. Russia has been expanding its Arctic military presence for years. China has declared itself a near-Arctic state and shown interest in Arctic resources and shipping routes. Trump's framing positions the United States as the power most capable of defending Greenland and therefore entitled to greater involvement. The argument resonates with those who see American military presence as the foundation of regional security, while raising concerns among those who prioritize sovereignty and international law. When pressed on his intentions regarding Greenland, potentially involving a NATO ally, Trump refused to rule out various approaches. "I wouldn't be telling you what I'm willing to do," Trump told reporters. "Certainly, I'm not going to give up options." The statement drew attention in European capitals. What had been seen as rhetoric is now being assessed more seriously as a potential strategic direction. Trump referenced Venezuela as an example of American action, but analysts caution that the circumstances in Greenland are not directly comparable to the situation in Venezuela. The two scenarios involve different legal frameworks, alliance relationships, and geopolitical contexts. Trump's reference to Venezuela carries implications that require careful analysis. The situation in Venezuela involved action against a government the U.S. opposed on specific grounds. By referencing it, Trump signaled American resolve on priorities, but the application to Greenland, Danish territory within a NATO framework, raises distinct questions. European leaders are assessing what various American approaches might mean for their own situations. The situation raises questions about sovereignty and international frameworks. Denmark is a NATO ally. Greenland is Danish territory, albeit with substantial autonomy. Economic pressure on an ally over territorial questions raises questions about established principles. Yet those principles face new pressures in an era of shifting power dynamics. European leaders have coordinated military exercises in Greenland, presenting them as defensive measures rather than a direct challenge to Trump's approach. Military forces from France, Germany, Norway, and Sweden have been sent to Greenland at Denmark's request as part of an exercise called Arctic Endurance. French officials described the deployment as a strong political signal, emphasizing European commitment to Arctic security. About 15 French personnel, including high mountain specialists, are participating. The entire operation involves forces from multiple NATO allies coordinating Arctic exercises. European leaders have characterized the exercises as pre-coordinated, defensive, and aimed at Arctic security within NATO frameworks. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and European Council President Antonio Costa have warned that the current tensions could affect transatlantic relations. They have characterized European exercises as routine NATO coordination for Arctic defense, rejecting characterizations of provocation. But their statements have had limited apparent effect on Washington's approach. The tariffs remain in place. Trump continues connecting trade penalties to the Greenland situation, and the disagreement between Washington and European capitals appears ongoing. European leaders face a difficult situation: how to maintain credibility while managing economic pressures without the military capacity for full independence from American security frameworks. The situation has highlighted the limits of European diplomatic leverage. Denmark has reaffirmed that Greenland's status is non-negotiable while working with the U.S. on security matters within NATO frameworks. Talks between Danish officials, Greenland's government, and U.S. representatives revealed what diplomats described as fundamental disagreement with the Trump administration on certain issues. Denmark has fought alongside the United States in Afghanistan and other conflicts, contributing to alliance operations for decades. But that history has not prevented current tensions. The Danish foreign minister acknowledged differences remain after meetings with Secretary of State Rubio and Vice President Vance. Denmark is navigating between maintaining its position on Greenland while preserving broader alliance relationships. Greenland itself, an autonomous territory with its own government and population, has its own perspective often overlooked in the broader discussion. Greenland's leaders have repeatedly stated that the island is not for sale, and that any decisions about its future must be made by Greenlanders themselves. But in the current situation, Greenland's voice is often secondary to louder actors in Washington, Brussels, and Moscow. The island's population of roughly 56,000 people watches as their homeland becomes a point of discussion in conflicts far beyond their control. Some Greenlanders have expressed interest in greater independence from Denmark, but independence towards self-determination, not transfer to another power. Whatever outcomes emerge will affect these communities most directly, but their voices carry limited weight compared to capitals thousands of miles away. Some political figures in France have questioned NATO membership, but the French government has not officially proposed leaving the alliance. According to German media outlet Berliner Zeitung, certain voices calling for reconsideration of France's NATO relationship have gained attention, driven by concerns about what some describe as shifts in American foreign policy. Clémence Guettet, deputy speaker of the French National Assembly, has been among those questioning the alliance. She has suggested that the current NATO structure may not fully serve French interests. In her view, certain aspects of alliance membership create constraints on France's sovereignty, strategic independence, and policy options. Guettet says France risks involvement in situations that may not align with its national interests. In interviews, she warned that remaining in an alliance where the leading power takes actions some consider contrary to international norms creates complications for France. Her party, France Insoumise, has long raised questions about NATO and previously pushed for France to reconsider aspects of its NATO integration, echoing themes of independence rooted in French political history. However, these remain minority positions, and French government policy continues to support NATO membership. The current discussion echoes themes from French political history. In 1966, President Charles de Gaulle withdrew France from NATO's integrated military command, arguing that French sovereignty required independent defense capacity. France remained a NATO member but operated outside the unified command structure for over 4 decades, only fully rejoining in 2009. The current questioning by some political figures revives Gaullist themes of strategic autonomy and independence. For those who see current American approaches as concerning, de Gaulle's historical position offers a reference point for different arrangements. French President Emmanuel Macron has taken a measured approach. He has commented on the importance of respecting Greenland's status, a statement that carried weight given the current tensions. France has participated in military exercises in Greenland alongside other European forces. French officials described this as demonstrating European commitment to Arctic security. But Macron has not endorsed calls from some quarters for NATO reconsideration. He appears to be seeking European strategic capability development within the alliance rather than departure from it. The question is whether that approach remains viable as various pressures continue. Macron's position reflects the situation facing many European leaders, concerned about certain American approaches, yet uncertain about alternatives that would require dramatic shifts in defense posture and spending. Behind the current tensions lies a deeper structural reality. Europe relies significantly on U.S. military power, logistics, intelligence, and nuclear deterrence. Decades of limited investment in European defense have created dependencies that cannot be changed quickly. A significant divergence from Washington would require rapid defense buildups, something many EU states are financially and politically unprepared to undertake. At the same time, accommodating all American demands risks establishing patterns that could be repeated. For years, European leaders have discussed strategic autonomy, the capacity to act independently of American power when necessary. Progress has been slow. European defense spending remains below stated targets. Integration of military capabilities faces political obstacles, and the scale of American military power makes full independence difficult to achieve. The current situation may accelerate these discussions. If the United States is perceived as an unpredictable partner, the argument for European self-sufficiency becomes stronger. But building genuine strategic autonomy requires time, money, and political will that European states have not yet demonstrated. Germany's position is particularly complex. As Europe's largest economy, Germany would bear significant costs from trade disputes with the United States. German industry depends heavily on exports, making it vulnerable to tariff measures. At the same time, Germany has been criticized for underinvesting in defense and relying heavily on American security guarantees. The current government faces pressure from multiple directions: maintain transatlantic relationships, support European solidarity, increase defense spending, and protect economic interests. Germany's choices will significantly shape Europe's collective response to the situation. Trump's approach to Greenland reflects a broader perspective that views alliance relationships in transactional terms. Traditional alliance relationships assume mutual benefit and shared commitment. Trump's framing suggests allies benefit from American power without adequate compensation. This transactional approach extends beyond Greenland to NATO burden sharing, trade relationships, and defense commitments across the alliance. European leaders who expected Trump's second term to follow more conventional patterns have had to adjust to an approach that challenges traditional alliance assumptions. From Trump's perspective, his approach appears to be achieving attention. European leaders are responding to his statements. The issue dominates transatlantic discussions. Denmark is engaged in conversations it had not anticipated. Whether this approach achieves Trump's stated objectives remains to be seen. But the strategy of applying pressure, treating allies differently when deemed necessary, reflects a consistent pattern in Trump's approach to international relations. Critics argue this approach damages long-term relationships for uncertain gains. Supporters argue it addresses underlying issues that conventional diplomacy has not resolved. What is clear is that traditional assumptions about alliance relationships are being tested, at least from Washington's current perspective. The Greenland situation raises questions about NATO's future direction. The alliance was built on the premise of collective defense against shared threats, originally the Soviet Union, now primarily Russia. But what happens when alliance members have significant disagreements with each other? When the United States characterizes European actions as problematic? When European leaders question whether current alliance dynamics serve their interests? These questions have no simple answers. The alliance has survived previous tensions and disagreements, but the current situation tests assumptions about shared interests and mutual trust. The Greenland situation reveals broader questions about the alliance system that has structured Western security since World War II. That system assumed shared threats would override bilateral disagreements. It assumed American leadership would be exercised in ways that served collective interests. It assumed allies would maintain cooperative relationships. These assumptions are now being questioned. The outcomes will shape whether the alliance system adapts, experiences strain, or transforms into something different. Some analysts see opportunities for evolution, a rebalancing that gives Europe greater capability while maintaining core security cooperation. Others see potential for significant changes in transatlantic relationships. The situation raises questions about sovereignty and international frameworks. Denmark is a NATO ally. Greenland is Danish territory, albeit with substantial autonomy. Economic pressure on an ally over territorial questions raises questions about established norms. Yet Trump has kept various options open. His administration has connected tariffs to the Greenland situation. The pressure continues regardless of traditional frameworks. International law has limited enforcement mechanisms when major powers pursue different approaches. The Venezuela situation demonstrated this reality. The Greenland situation may provide additional examples. The international system again confronts the tension between principles and power. Principles suggest sovereignty should be respected, allies should maintain cooperative relationships, and disputes should be resolved through negotiation. Power dynamics suggest capabilities matter significantly. Leverage determines outcomes, and those with greater power have more options. This tension is not new. It has characterized international relations throughout history. But the Greenland situation brings it into focus within an alliance that was built on different assumptions. Whether traditional principles can shape outcomes, even among allies, remains a central question. The answer will shape not just the Greenland situation, but broader trajectories in international relations. The Greenland situation occurs against the backdrop of intensifying Arctic competition. Climate change is transforming the region, opening shipping routes that could reshape global trade and making previously inaccessible resources economically viable. Russia has been developing its Arctic territories for years, building facilities, deploying systems, and asserting positions over areas of the Arctic. China, despite having no Arctic territory, has declared itself a near-Arctic state and invested in polar research and infrastructure. The United States has been increasing focus on Arctic competition. Trump's interest in Greenland reflects growing recognition that the Arctic will be significant for great power dynamics in coming decades. Greater U.S. involvement with Greenland would strengthen American positioning in the North Atlantic and Arctic, with implications for both military and economic competition. European nations have their own Arctic interests. Norway, Finland, and Sweden all have Arctic territories, and Denmark's connection to Greenland makes it an Arctic stakeholder as well. The question is whether Arctic cooperation can continue amid current pressures, or whether the region becomes another arena of competition. Moscow is observing the transatlantic tensions with apparent interest. For decades, Russian strategy has sought to highlight divisions within the Western alliance, note disagreements between Washington and European capitals, and question NATO's cohesion. The current situation is providing material for those objectives without Russia having to do much beyond offer commentary. The Kremlin's references serve to highlight European constraints, while positioning Russia as an observer rather than a participant. Russia potentially benefits from various outcomes. If Europe accommodates American demands significantly, it could suggest that European positions are dependent on American approval, a message Moscow could use in other contexts. If Europe resists and alliance relationships strain, Russia faces a West with reduced capacity for coordinated action. Either direction has potential benefits for Russian interests. The only outcome that would disadvantage Moscow is one where the situation somehow strengthens Western unity, an outcome that appears less likely given current trajectories. Russian strategists are likely studying the situation carefully for insights about Western dynamics that might be relevant in other contexts. The situation's trajectory remains uncertain. Several scenarios are possible. European states could accommodate American approaches, adjusting positions and accepting changed dynamics. Washington could moderate its approach, finding arrangements that preserve alliance relationships. Alternatively, tensions could continue. Tariffs could increase. More exercises could occur. Rhetoric could intensify. Economic effects could accumulate. Alliance strains could deepen. The most concerning scenario involves miscalculation, actions taken based on assumptions about the other side's limits that prove incorrect. Russia's commentary raises questions about Moscow's role in the situation. Is Russia merely an opportunistic observer, noting tensions it did not create? Or is Moscow actively seeking to highlight transatlantic divisions through information efforts, diplomatic commentary, or other means? The daddy reference suggests Russia wants to be seen as relevant to the discussion, inserting itself into a conversation between Washington and European capitals. Whether Russia has the capacity to significantly influence outcomes is debatable. But Moscow clearly sees opportunity in Western disagreements and appears interested in highlighting them. Europe faces significant choices. The continent must consider whether to accommodate American approaches, resist and accept economic costs, or pursue genuine strategic autonomy that reduces dependence on Washington. None of these options is without significant challenges. Accommodation may invite continued pressure. Resistance requires capabilities Europe has not fully developed. Autonomy requires investments Europe has not yet made. The choices European leaders make in coming months will shape transatlantic relations for years, perhaps longer. The situation forces European leaders to address questions they have long deferred. How much adjustment are they willing to make for American security relationships? How much economic cost are they willing to accept to maintain positions? How much are they willing to invest in defense capabilities that could provide greater independence? These questions have no easy answers, but the current situation requires responses nonetheless. The world is watching as the Western alliance navigates its most significant internal tensions in decades. Observers like Russia and China see potential opportunity in transatlantic disagreements. Partners elsewhere wonder about the reliability of various commitments. International institutions built on alliance cooperation face uncertain contexts. The Greenland situation is about more than one Arctic island. It is about the nature of alliances, the meaning of sovereignty, and the frameworks that govern relations between states. How this situation develops will send signals beyond the Arctic, shaping assessments in capitals worldwide about the meaning of American partnership and the future of the Western order. The world watches as principles and power interact. Russia and China observe as Western allies disagree. European leaders articulate principles: sovereignty, alliance solidarity, diplomatic resolution. The United States pursues its interests, taking approaches it deems necessary using economic and other tools to achieve objectives. The tension between these dynamics is not new. It has characterized international relations throughout modern history, But the Greenland situation brings it into sharp focus within an alliance that was built on different assumptions, whether principles can shape power, whether power can operate within principled frameworks, or whether the two remain in perpetual tension. These questions shape the international order. Russia's commentary reminds everyone that others are watching and drawing conclusions. The Kremlin's daddy reference may be crude, but it captures a perception that Europe has limited independent capacity relative to Washington, even when Washington's approaches create concerns. Whether that perception proves accurate depends on choices European leaders have not yet finalized. The world watches, the outcomes matter, and ordinary people in Greenland, in Europe, and beyond will experience the consequences of decisions made in distant capitals.